Hello farmers, thank you for making time and watching Agricultural New Directions Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030, where we discuss everything agriculture here in Zimbabwe. Now you'd find that we are in winter in Zimbabwe, and generally in winter that is where we have our wheat established and planted by our local farmers. Our government Zimbabwe, through the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, has been reiterating the emphasis and having emphasis on the fact that as a country we need to increase our hectarage of wheat planting, wheat establishment to about 85,000 hectares. We are looking at having our farmers taking wheat as an enterprise this winter. We are also going to be looking at how the various stakeholders in the agriculture industry have dedicated their time and resources to ensure that this season is a success. We are talking of the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, which has ensured the public, the wheat farmers here in Zimbabwe, they are going to be having electricity, unhindered supply of electricity in their various geographical locations for irrigating their wheat. Now, generally, every cropping enterprise begins with land preparation, which is the case today. We are looking at how we are going to be establishing wheat here in Zimbabwe. Wendy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Wadza. It's always a pleasure.
As we get into our discussion, I've highlighted we are going to be looking at land preparation. We are going to start with land preparation and go on to hardening and even irrigating of the wheat. Can you talk briefly on the land that we are standing in? I understand that there was tobacco. Can you maybe highlight on the importance of crop rotation, aligning it from tobacco production to wheat establishment?
In a bid for us to align to sustainable agriculture initiatives, it's important for every farmer to understand the significance of crop rotations in building the nutrition capacity of the soil and also in adding in terms of the microbial activity that happens in the soil for the crop to be able to sustain itself using the natural environment in which it's growing. We need to become custodians of our soils. We need to nurture and protect and make sure that we are doing our best to replenish the nutrition that is being used up from the soils that we are going to be establishing our crops. With that in mind, here we are seeing that the crop that was here last season was tobacco, like you rightfully highlighted. It being tobacco, it will be established on ridges. So it was established on ridges for the sake that tobacco grows well on a ridge. But now that we want to establish a wheat, we need to destroy those ridges effectively so that our land is even, we have a fine tilt for the effective establishment and emergence of our wheat crop. So with that in mind, here we saw the disc coming in to do the first disking where they were destroying the ridges in the soil. Then they'll also do cross disking where they're now going the other direction to make sure that the fine tilt is created. But before they did all that, they came in with irrigation, some light irrigation to make sure that there is some nutrition to make the soil workable. And it also enabled them to also soften in terms of the root system around the stalks. You know, tobacco stalks can be very heavy with an extensive root system like we were seeing here. So it's important for us to also make sure that if we irrigate, we are also increasing the workability of the ground. And the irrigation as well, it also helps in making sure that we are conserving and creating a bank in the soil of moisture, whereby when we come in to establish the next crop, we won't be found wanting. The crop will also be in a position to effectively utilize the surrounding moisture in the soil.
Let us talk about wheat establishment. When it comes to planting wheat, generally what soil conditions are favored by wheat? Are we talking of achieving that fine tilt, or what are we talking about? In tobacco we have ridges. What do we have in wheat?
In wheat, the important thing for a farmer to note is the seed size, where you find that wheat has very small little grains that act as the seed. So you need to make sure that you create a fine tilt if you're going to be using conventional methods of tillage. But if you're going to be using conservation methods of tillage, you can still do so, Wadza, when you're establishing your wheat. But you need to have the right equipment, whereby you're using the no-till planter, or maybe you're using the seed drill, which is a more precise implement when you're growing your wheat, whereby it only opens a ridge where you're planting your wheat and it goes as deep as you would want it to go. Some farmers might come in with a ripper first. They rip where they want to establish their wheat, and then the seed drill will come on that same area for establishment. So it's not an issue of you having to do primary tillage only, but you can also do conventional tillage in a bid to align with conservation agriculture initiatives, but you need to get the tools right. Then for wheat, Wadza, the day you count as the first day of establishment of wheat is the day you introduce the irrigation.
Yes.
When you have not introduced the irrigation, you haven't planted your wheat. Even if you spread your wheat in the field 2 weeks before you start irrigating, we count the day that you irrigated as the first day of establishment.
Thank you so much, Wendy. That was very detailed. When it comes to wheat, I want us to talk about irrigation. I also want us to talk about plant nutrition. I'm talking of the bus of fertilizer and even the top dressing, their quantities, and maybe the periods that they are going to be applied. When it comes to bus of fertilizer, I understand that when it comes to establishing wheat, you come in with your Vicon or your fertilizer spreader. What are we talking about in terms of the quantities and even the names of the fertilizers?
To sum it upwards, what you want me to explain falls under the umbrella term good agronomic practices,
Yes.
where our farmers are employed on to make sure that they are doing the right things aligned to the crop in question. Here, talking about wheat, we look at the nutrition component, for example. Every farmer should understand the individual nutrition constitution of their soil for them to make an informed decision on the fertilizer quantities and type for them to apply. But nonetheless, the general recommendation for wheat falls within the range of 250 to 350 kgs per hectare of the basal fertilizer. It then depends on the basal fertilizer that your farmer is going to be using. If you are going to be using the standard 7-14-7, which is the nutrient constitution, in any fertilizer, I hasten to say that every farmer should buy fertilizer based on the nutrients that are available in the individual bag,
yes,
rather than the name or the color of the bag, because you need to understand what you are giving your crop. So if you are going to be using 7-14-7, that's when you come in with the higher rates, because in terms of the nutrition that is going to be availed by that fertilizer is slightly lower. But if you're going to be using the blends, which are the specialty fertilizers that are available, the higher analysis fertilizers, where maybe there's 14-28-14, which is double D, maybe you reduce the rates, but guided by soil analysis and soil experts, so that you are applying the right constitution of nutrients that are required by the wheat crop. Then there is one fertilizer that farmers really like to use, particularly when they're establishing cereals, which is 6-23-23. From the name and the number of nutrients that you're getting there, you can tell that there's high phosphorus and high potash already. The nitrogen might be slightly lower, but that's not a challenge, because you will need higher nitrogen as the crop progresses when it gets into its vegetative stage. So initially, the lower nitrogen percentage will be enough just for the establishment and the early growth of the crop. So in terms of the nutrition, that's what we are looking at. Then in terms of the seed rate, in terms of the planting rates that you're going to require as the seed rates for wheat, when you look at wheat, we want to be guided by the planting implement that is going to be used. For example, if the farmer is going to use a broadcasting implement that includes a Vicon spreader, which is what we are going to be doing here, you can use a seed rate that ranges from around 125 to 135 kgs per hectare. Some farmers are going as high as 150 kgs per hectare, but we want to caution against increasing seed rates without a justifiable increase in the yield that you're going to be getting.
Finally, Wendy, as we close this segment, in a snippet, why do we establish wheat in winter here in Zimbabwe?
The importance of catching the wheat planting window also speaks to a farmer being able to catch the next season in which they are going to be establishing their crop. Because if you plant your wheat in May, which is the period that we recommend our farmers to plant from the 1st of May to around the 25th of May, particularly the first 2 weeks of May, you optimize on the yield, because you also safeguard your crop from reaching the rainy season when it's still in the field, whereby the falling numbers will be affected, the grain quality, the taste density will be affected by the rain. So catching the planting window also makes sure that you're also avoiding that. Then if you plant late, disease incidence is also going to be higher as the crop gets into summer. So that's also something that you need to look at. So our farmers are also cautioned against planting late. This is the critical window for wheat planting. The May window, the first 2 weeks of May, going to the 3rd week, until the end of May, we should be planting. Every farmer should make sure that their wheat is in the ground by the end of May to optimize on productivity.
Thank you. There you heard it, viewers. This is Wendy Madzura, a wheat production expert here in Zimbabwe, was taking us through the nitty-gritties in terms of land preparation ahead of wheat establishment. On that note, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. We are talking of wheat establishment here in Zimbabwe. We are in winter, and generally this is where wheat establishment begins and progresses. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wadzanai Manyore. It's on 0772-807-506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, AgriBusiness Wadzanai. Leave your comments and suggestions and make a follow-up on this episode and more on our YouTube channel, AgriBusiness with Wadzanai. We are also available on Twitter, where most of these discussions take place. It's at AgriBusiness110. Now, earlier on, before into the break, I was joined by Wendy Matashu Madzura, a wheat expert here in Zimbabwe, who was enlightening us on how to prepare our land, which is sustainable and conducive for the wheat to grow properly. At this point in time, I've taken the liberty of inviting the farm manager here at Arusha Farm. We are in Goromon, the Mashonaland East, Mr. Budala. Budala ndinokuchingamidza pachirongwa.
Ndokutendai nerudo rwenyu.
Yes. As we get into our discussion Budala, tichitanga kutaura nezvechirongwa chino. Ndemapi ma-operations aminawo paArusha Farm. Ndinonzwisisa kuti muno matiri kutodyara wheat maamine fodya. Ende patapinda kugedhi uko tatoona kuti papaine mabhero ari kutorongedzwa kuenda kumusika. Saka ma-operations enyu akamira sei? Ndoziva kuti hamuiti wheat chete.
Yeah, pano paArusha panapa wadza tinoita fodya, chibage, wheat nemombe. Livestock iripo pano. Livestock tine hwai, mombe dzacho nembudzi.
Budala, I would also want you to enlighten our audience there at home in terms of the hectarage yaminayo pari zvino in terms of wheat. Mahectares amundruzi yati muri kudyara but muri ma-early beds mune imwe futi yamakatodyara kudhara yakutoenda kuhardening. Mahectares aminawo pamwe chete kusanganisira neino yatiri mairi akamira sei mumastages awo. Yatiri kutanga kudyara izvezvi mutasira kudyara mahectares mangani, yakutoenda kuhardening kana yakabva kudyarwa mahectares mangani zvichienda zvakadaro.
So far wadza atisati aita zvinhu zvaka wheat yakati one day. Already planted area is 42 hectares. So with this one yataka kutanga kutogadzira iyi. Ndoda kutaura nepatiri panapa it's 15 hectares. But overall the whole munda is 60 hectares. So tikazoti this week if we finish up planting this 15 hectares, tine 57 hectares already planted. But for the germination, we've already germinated close to 30 hectares.
Okay. Yes. Budala, panyaya dzecalibration ndipo pamwe pane mwongo wekudyarwa kwewheat. Kwembesa dzakaita sana wheat sana soya beans apa. Pane nyaya dzecalibration dzinouya. Mashoko enyu amukataura nenyaya dzecalibration zvakamira sei? Ndinotoona kuti kumwe mapurazi panotosvika nguva yekuti basa rinotomira. Vanhu vari kuita chipatapata kusaziva kuti vhaicon toibata sei, planta toibata sei, seed drill toita sei. Panyaya dzecalibration apa ndoziva kuti pane kahunyanzvi kanodiwa. Zvakamira sei samanager paArusha Farm?
Yeah, chinhu chiri very important wadza panyaya yekuita macrops ose. Haisi nyaya yewheat chete inoda cooperation. Fodya inoda cooperation parija rachona as well. Kuchibage kune seed drill kana maplanters anoda futi cooperation. So what is very important is to know your fertilizer, amount of fertilizer that you're putting per hectare, as well as the amount of seeds per hectare. And it varies. Sekutaura kwamboitwa pakutanga na Wendy. Zvinoenderana nekuti fertilizer yenyu muri kudira yakawanda sei, muri kuidirirei. So you see tinoti soil analysis, inonzi pH. Tinochera masamples mumunda wose. Toendesa for testing kuma laboratories. Saka iva ndo vanozotitaurira isusu kuti muri kudira 200 kgs nechikonzero chekuti pH yakanaka. Saka tiri papo chinhu chinokosha ndio mushini watinawo panapa unonzi vhaicon uda kucalibratwa kuti tizive kuti fertilizer yatiri kuisa mumunda medu yakafanana here kwose, kwete kuti fembera pamwe chete nembewu yachona. Chocolate is very important.
Budala, tichidzika takatarisa nyaya dzewheat mune makore muri mubasa iri. Ndoziva kuti harisi gore renyu rekutanga kurima wheat. Mumwaka wapfuura uyu watabva chando cha 2022 makabudisa yield yakadii pahectare, zvazvakamira sei?
Ya pano ningi muno mugoromonzi east muno pano paArusha pano. Tingati tinokohwa. Mayields edu anokwanisa kuenda kuma 8.5 per hectare kana kuti 7 roughly, but tiri parange yekuma 8. Nekuti normally last season 125 hectares, we managed to get away with at least about 900,000 kgs. Divided by the number of hectares atatinayo, at least zvinokwanisa kutaurira kuti takanga tichiona ma 7 or 8, close to 8 tons per hectare.
Okay.
Wongo.
Now ndoti taure kuda mamwe maybe panyaya dzemadiridziro. Ndinoziva kuti mwongo wewheat, the anchor yewheat production iri pakudiridza. Munguva yachando kunenge kusina mvura, ivhu rinenge rakaoma. Pane nyaya dzekudiridzwa kunoita wheat. Zvamungatitauriro panyaya yemadiridziro zviri kufamba sei? Ndinonzwa pandataura patatanga chirongwa ndandototaura kuti tiri kufara tine zesa, tine ma-stakeholders mu-agriculture industry ari kutaura kuti vachange vachisapota zvikuru, vachange vachitsigira varimi vewheat. Panyaya dzemadiridziro pakamira sei? Kurudziro yamungataura maererano nekudiridzwa, because dzimwe nguva mwana kuti ini ndoda kurima wheat but kwakukudiridzawo kundikana, but fertilizer aisa zvese aisa, but panyaya yekudiridza apa ndo panoita result even mugohwo guru kana gohwo rakanaka. Mashoko enyu amungataura nenyaya dzemadiridziro akamira sei?
Padzidziso yandingakwanisa kuti ndipe varimi wadza ndeyekuti izvo tiri kudzokera panyaya yefertilizer. Fertilizer yatanzi tiise iyoyo tikaikwanisa nembeu yachona tikaikwanisa tozoti takutaura nyaya yemvura, nekuti wheat ukaenda unotarisa wewe yakada kufanana nerice. Wheat nerice zvangoti siyani,
zviri musame family,
zviri musame mupanda. Asi wheat inoda mvura. Saka nawo kana tichitaura nenyaya yekuti mvura, tiri kutaura futi nenyaya yesoil type yacho. Kune masand soils, kune masand loam soils, kune maclay, especially kuno kwatiri kugoromonzi kuno tine clay. Clay actually it needs more mvura, mvura yakawanda. Nokuda kweizvozvo tinoona gohwo rakakwana rakanaka. Ma-qualities edu anenge akanaka, most of it anopinda ma-A grades. Pano inonzi premium. Dzimwewo zvadzo dziri kumwe mindawo nema-sand soils dzinopinda mu-standard. Asi panapa mainly our chief crop yese is going into premium. Of which premium is the most recommended mbeu yekuti makakohwa makagona fertilizer yenyu nezvose kusanganisira nemvura.
Okay, they heard it, viewers. We're talking of Arusha Farm here. We're looking at a brief overview of what they are doing here. Their enterprises from livestock to cropping ventures. They are letting us they have been into wheat production for over maybe a lot of years. They've been doing wheat. And also in terms of tobacco production, they are having good yields. They are livestock, etc. On that note, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, viewers. We are in the third and final segment of your program, Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030, where we are looking at wheat production. Now you will find that in our country here, the government is making calls to our farmers to ensure that we reach an 85,000 hectare mark, to ensure that the country is assured of wheat supply. We are talking of bread, our muffins, and the different confectionery products that emanate from wheat production. At this point in time, I'm joined by Wendima Tashumadzura, a wheat expert, who will be taking us through the differences or the staggering processes that Arusha Farm here employed. Wendy, you would find that we are standing in different blocks of wheat. Can you tell us the importance of staggering or having different blocks when it comes to wheat production?
Thank you so much, Wadza. And yes, we are actually watching where we step in this block, because we are actually stepping on wheat that is actually germinating. So the importance of staggering is that in any business venture, you also want to reduce the risk that is associated with planting at the same time. So if you're going to be planting your crop at different stages, it means that the critical growth stages will coincide with the different climatic conditions that might be required or not required by the crop. So here we know that their first established block that is at the far end there, showing a light green there that we are seeing, that was established on the 22nd of April, and that crop is now at hardening. Then we have the next block that they established here on the 3rd of April. Then the block that we are standing in here was established on the 14th of April, which is why now it's starting to sprout. So the important thing, like you highlighted, is for you to make sure that you understand the critical growth stages, the critical planting window, and make sure that all your crop is planted at the optimum time. And the day that we start counting as the first day for wheat planting is the day that the irrigation is introduced into the field.
Thank you so much, Wendy. We're going to cross over to the next block and talk about hardening. Stay tuned. Dizo.
But mira also thank you so much. Okay. Then when it comes to hardening,
it's okay.
The amount of water required.
Sorry. Now, Wendy, can we talk about briefly the amount of water that is required from planting up to maybe generally when you are headed towards senescence or maturity? You find that wheat is produced in winter and winter is dry. Can we talk about the water requirements for wheat production?
For wheat production, Wadza, like you rightfully put it, it's a crop established outside of the rainy season. So a farmer needs to know right before they establish, at the planning stage, the amount of water that they'll be able to provide. So you're looking at around 450 to 600 millimeters, which speaks to 4.5 to 6 megaliters of water. So this is also then governed by irrigation scheduling. Irrigation scheduling should be guided by the soil type that you have. For sandy soils, you might irrigate more frequently because you lose water fast. Then if, for clay soils, you might also then come in less frequently. But you need to irrigate also guided by the circumstances that are available. Maybe you can only irrigate at night. Maybe you can only irrigate on 3 days a week. So you can also be guided by that in terms of your schedule. But as a rough rule of thumb, for those farmers in sandy soils, they need 30 to 35 millimeters of water, maybe after every 7 to 10 days. Then for those in clay soils, they can come in with 40 to 45 millimeters of water after every 10 to around 12, 13 days. But for irrigation with center pivot, some farmers can come in with 22 millimeters at least once a week. But again, circumstances surrounding your irrigation should be taken into account.
Thank you so much, Wendy. We're going to cross over and look at hardening, the process of hardening in wheat. Stay tuned.
Indeed.
Now, Wendy, we are standing in a block that you alluded to the fact that it was established on the 23rd of April this year. Can you talk to us in terms of hardening? What is hardening and why is it done? We normally hear of hardening in tobacco production, but now we are also hearing about it in wheat production. What is the significance of hardening? And maybe begin with what is it? Why is it done?
In wheat production, it's a pertinent question that you have brought about, the issue to do with hardening, because some farmers might wonder why it would be important for them to stress a crop that they will have established. After establishing a successful crop like this, then you stop irrigation and you stop nutrition management for a period of time. But the significance of that is that you want to make the crop accustomed to the surroundings. You want to toughen the crop so that it's able to survive even under harsh conditions. So what we are saying when we are hardening the crop is that we are reducing or terminating the application of water for a period of time. If it's clay soil, we can do that for about 10 days, 14 days. But if it's sandy soil, maybe about 10 days, give or take. So that at that period of time, you are not applying any irrigation at all. This is done in a bid to make sure that you increase the number of roots that are going to be formed, particularly the crown roots, as they are also responsible for the extraction of the moisture and the nutrition, making the crop grow more effectively. The second reason is that you want to get optimum number of tillers. If you get an optimum number of tillers, it also speaks to the optimum number of spikes that you're going to get, the optimum number of spikelets per plant, and the optimum number of grains that you're going to ultimately get. And then it also then speaks overall to the yield. So the hardening stage plays a pivotal role in increasing productivity in wheat. It's critical. It increases tillering. It also promotes crown root development.
Now, Wendy, as we close off in a snippet, what comes after hardening? You have done your hardening maybe between 14 days to 21 days. You are done with hardening. Then what?
After hardening, the next stage is now that you are also introducing fertilizer, you're introducing herbicide application, and now you're also being governed by the irrigation scheduling in terms of your irrigation. So the first stage, given that the crop was being stressed for about 14 days, 21 days, 10 days, depending on the water holding capacity, you need to introduce light irrigation first. Once you come in with your irrigation, the crop is revived. Once the crop is revived, you come in with your herbicide application to stress the weeds. Once the weeds are stressed, then you come in with your top dressing fertilizer at a rate of about 250 to about 350, some get to around 400 kgs per hectare, depending on the fertilizer in question. So after hardening, it's now game on. You need to make sure that you're geared up to give the crop all that it requires to increase production.
Thank you so much, Wendy. That was a very detailed presentation, and I would like to thank you for giving our farmers there at home knowledge on how to produce wheat. We are talking of becoming an upper middle class economy by 2030, and one way we can do that is by reducing our import bill. We can produce our wheat, our own wheat. We have the conducive environment for wheat production here in Zimbabwe. From me, your host was Zanai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram. It's a W Manyore, and the crew behind the scenes. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.